when whatever we're talking about, it brings up a story for me. It happens. It's just automatic. So they said, well, why in the hell don't you write a book? And I said, well, I don't know. So one time, I got this package for whatever the reason, and I said, oh, a present. I opened it, and it was a book, a black book. And I said, oh, gosh, I wonder what it's about. And they said, we don't know, you haven't written it yet. And when I opened it, it was all blank pages. But anyway, who am I? I'm MaryJane Walsh. A lot of people know my name, and because some places, because I'm the oldest one around anymore. I am in my church. There was one lady a little older than me, and I think we're almost tied now, and I feel like the matriarch. And they all say to me, oh, it's because of your wisdom, and I think, no, just because you're old doesn't mean you're smart. I think the majority of us are not smart at all. We're just dumb little dingbats that sit sometimes in the chair. Fortunately, I haven't reached that, and just wither away. Because you've kind of done it all. You're tired of it all. It's not as exciting, and that's kind of the way you feel. And then you don't have the poop to pop, so you sit. But the minute you decide that's it, that's a mistake. That's where you end up. You have to keep going. And falling down or going somewhere and dying while you're doing it, I don't see anything sad about that. If in your plan, and we all have one according to my belief, if we have a plan, and it happens to be we die while we're on a trip or a vacation, so what's bad about that? It's not unique to die. It's democratic. So, anyway, I am who I am, and you already heard that. And I'm an old lady. And when they say, how are you? I say, I'm old, and that tells you everything. Because what goes with age is who I am, can't see, can't smell, can't walk. And all those things happen because the body breaks down. And eventually, your soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it, escapes. And the body isn't worth a hoot in Hades. It deteriorates, it rots and whatever. And you escape to something else, which in many beliefs is either a heaven or a hereafter. And if that isn't true for most people, and I believe it is, then what's the worth of doing anything at all here? If you're not looking for a reward of some kind, or the end of this effort, or, for that matter, what's the point in not committing suicide if you don't like it? So there are answers. I think the majority of humans believe there's something after this. They can't define it or understand it, and we're not supposed to. We're supposed to believe, and that's faith. And there's lots of kinds of faith, religious faith, or faith in this one, or faith in that one. And I believe I could not live without my faith in the way I believe about the hereafter and a supreme being and all that. I just couldn't exist. And I think a lot of people, when all the chips are down and there's nowhere to go and they're on the bottom, there's no way but up, they all say, oh my God. And then I say, who is this? Do you believe? Who is he? Is he, if he is, or you say, who are you talking about? So somewhere in there's this somebody, I think. And I think it's necessary for survival. It is for me. Oh. I believe right now, I think we're in serious trouble. And I am ignorant of politics, and even those who are running. You read in the little literature they send around before elections, and you don't understand it. The majority of us don't. I don't feel like I'm any dum-dum, but I don't understand a lot of it. I think it's gotten our government so complex. It was, in its simplicity, it was beautiful, it functioned, and it was understood. I know we have to grow and progress, etc., etc., but the average citizen doesn't know what the hell he's voting for. The pros seem just like the cons, and they're all mixed up. So I don't know. But I think that we have grown morally. We're very broken down, our country. I think that we are not the America that is looked up to anymore. We're the ugly Americans. Not everybody likes us anymore. Financially, we're in a big rut. And all this has happened, what a pity. For those, and it's our fault, we elected them to do a better job, and they said they would. Not always possible to win all the battles, but to make maybe a better effort. And I don't know. I think what's going to happen, and I think there's no other way to look at it, is that if the government, if there's no faith in the government, and especially from the young people who are at liberty to rebel, and it seems like it's them in the streets fighting, then I think we're going to have a revolution. Because on paper, at meetings, talks aren't getting anything done, and if they feel they're failing them, then they're going to take over and try it their way. And maybe they will do it better. It happened in France and other countries, and I think we're good targets for maybe it's happening here. The problem is, I think, that some of our young punks, oh God help us if we get them too. So, but it'll have to play out. But there's an awful lot of resolving that needs to be done, and it's going to take some guts and guys with character to get up there and say, you know, I'm going to do it my way, whether you like it, it's not, whatever. I don't know. He was a good father, a good lover, a good dancer. And he was all these things, and my parents loved him. My grandmother especially loved him. And she died while he was overseas in World War II. And we always said she missed him so. But anyway, he had already graduated school and lived on a street called Bridge Avenue with a group of mostly boys. They had their own basketball team. And all of their parents were good friends. And they were just a kind of a clan. And they were known as the Bridge Avenue Gang. And one of my friends dated one of the guys. And one day, while we were walking down the street, her name was Lillian, and Frank, was crossing the street from the gym, which was this smelly old building where these kids were sweating, never had church to change, you know, clean ones. Just grab me yours and I'll mix my sweat with yours. Oh, Lord. But anyway, he was crossing the street, and I said, who is that guy? He said, he's Frank Walsh. Would you like to meet him? I said, you know, I would. So one day, Ben Doherty, who was the other guy, and Frank came by. To make a long story short, we met, we dated. He was very shy. In fact, he was so shy. And in those days, remember, we didn't have cars. We had to go somewhere on a bus or streetcar. And we were walking down the street from God knows where, I don't know, in front of a little house that my sister later lived in. And I said, hey, Frank, we've been seeing each other out. Wouldn't you like to kiss me? And he said, well, yeah. I said, well, then, damn it, why don't you? And he did. And my friend, who was babysitting in this house, said, oh, I saw you guys. I said, well, you wouldn't believe it. I had to ask for it, and it was the first one. And Frank wasn't around for whatever reason. I went looking for him, and he was in the bathroom holding his arm and sweaty. And I said, what's the matter? Don't you feel good? He said, oh, I don't know. He said, it's this damn, I got some gas and it's this damn arm. It must be from bowling. I said, well, I never heard about anybody sweating and having gas, from bowling, Frank. I really think we should go to the doctor. Oh, damn it. And I said, no, we're going. So we did. And in those days, 40 years ago, we didn't, an EKG was the best we had for telling a story about your heart. So we went to the hospital, and it was normal. He said, see, I told you. He lit a cigarette, and we went home. Later on, around midnight hour, the doctor called. And he said, well, did my practice go to hell? And I said, no, they're all alive. And I wasn't going to mention Frank because it was not, there wasn't anything wrong. But I did. He said, oh, Mary Jane, put Frank on, and you stay on too. I want you to hear this. And he said, I don't know what was happening to you, Frank, but you're going to go to the hospital. I'm going to throw the book at you, and if it's fine, great. If not, that's where you need to be. So we did. We went in on a Tuesday night at midnight. Wednesday, everything was fine. Thursday, while he was all hooked up to all the monitors, that's when it happened. He had his attack, which was a good one, I think, because he did say later, I'm glad I was here because that kind of hurt. So after a week or better, he was functioning and all things were returning to normal, and they took him out of there and put him on the floor. But had we known, and what we do now, all the visioning we get with, the ultrasound and the casts and all of that, they would have seen what was wrong with him. And he did have extensive coronary artery disease. And so that morning, he was, apparently had gotten up to go potty and came back and died instantly, and they found him that way in bed. A good way to go. Well, I have decided that instead of, I just can't see being buried in the ground, no matter how you're entombed in a coffin or being all these slugs and wormy, it just kills me. So I would have ordained to be cremated. But then I thought, this old body, it didn't do very much with it while you were alive and while it was functioning better. Why don't you leave and at least have one good thing you leave behind? And if you can call this body a good thing, I don't know what tongue-in-cheek do I say that. Because I wanted to I was going to send my notes. I told the doctor, I happened to see him yesterday, I'm going to give me a copy of those labs. I'm going to send them so that this poor student who gets my cadaver is going to say, well, thank God they told me why it came out, or I don't see it here. So I'm going to have a little tag on my toe saying, no gallbladder, no boob, no tonsil. And that reminds me of a dirty joke. It's not dirty. It's just a joke. And I have to tell you that because of what we're talking about. This older gentleman and this gal got married, and they were in their honeymoon cottage, wherever, getting ready, and she was took off her wig and her false eyelashes and her makeup, and you said, my Lord, what's left? So that was it, and boy, there was a distinct difference between how she looked going in and getting undressed. So he's undressing, and he took off his trousers and shorts, and there was no dinkus. And she said, oh, he said, shot off in the war to get even. Well, I have a saying, and because I don't like advice, and it's always been that way for me. When my kids came for Thanksgiving, or when we had a party, or whenever there was a gathering of any kind for those I loved, or even those I didn't love, when they were leaving, I just hated goodbye. And when my son came, such a long way to see me, and he was going home, I always felt so blue. And my next day was not a very fun one. And so I would say, well, I know you have to go, and I want you to have a good time. I would rather be sad myself and have you go and do your thing. And so I say be happy. And if you're happy, then that solves my problem. And I've always said that. So instead of goodbye, I say be happy. And if they are, then they don't have to care about another darn thing. Lots of things come into play about being happy. And I guess you need to grow older to realize that material things and more of this, that, or the other is not the answer. It's how you feel about those you love, people. And they say, I never did find out who they were these days. They're always talking about. They say that when in the hereafter you will meet souls, spirits, whatever. We'll have a body later on that we can use or not use. They'll say something and you'll say, oh, I don't remember that. And they'll say, oh yeah, but you did. And a couple of times, but once, especially I remember this girl who was a lovely woman, and she had so many problems. And for some reason or another, we had a conversation. And later on she said, you know, Mary Jane, I am so glad we had that talk. She said, I needed to hear what you said. I said, well, you just answered my question. Why am I hanging around? You know, and if that is good for you, then I know, then I should be hanging around. And I say, even now, because I have a lot of friends who are lonely, they say that's another word, lonely. Why would you be lonely? You have to get over it and let something else, you know, fill your heart, being, whatever. And there's plenty of it around you, so you need to check into that. So I always say, if you're lonely, I'm up till the wee hours. If I go to bed early, it's a big mistake because I don't go to sleep. I'm up every hour on the hour, so you might as well stay up and go at midnight or 1 or whenever it is, and then I go to sleep. So I always say, you won't be waking me up, and if you want to talk, call me. And this, I have to get this in. It's an answer to a prayer. And I call them my little miracles. And my friend calls them spiritualization of a happening. And I said, well, that sounds good too, but I still call it a miracle. Because I love to go to church. And Terry, my friend, who takes me so faithfully, was away on her vacation. And I thought, well, you know, I don't know how I'm going to get there. And I hate to say I'll just give up. But that night, and very rarely has she ever called to say, the gal who cleans for me, hi Mary Jane, I'm calling because you said call if I'm lonely, and I'm lonely. And I said, oh, Josephine, let's talk, and you just answered my prayer, because she goes to church, lives right in the neighborhood, and she got to take me. Now tell me, that is coincidence. Yeah, I love it, because all these little kids haven't a clue. They only know trick-or-treat. And I said to one little kid, not this year, you know, I don't have any treats, what's your trick? He said, gee, I don't know. So, but they all are darling, and they're little, and some of the big kids had pillowcases, the little ones had buckets overflowing, and they all came with their parents, and I had about 50 some odd kids. And I ran out of candy, which was just terrific because it didn't have any left over, as sometimes you do. I love it, but I'm a ham. I love it all. I love Christmas. I love Halloween, Thanksgiving. I love getting ready for it. And you say, well, why are you getting ready? Nobody's coming, you idiot. But I do anyway. And Sue says to me, Mom, do you like it? Do you do it? Do you decorate? I said, yeah. She says, well, that's all that's necessary. I said, yeah, but the big thing is sharing that makes it more important and liking it better. You have to be giving. You have to be compassionate. And you have to care. You have to really care a little bit. And I think you have to be interested. I say to Lynn, because Lynn, I see her once a week, and I'm tell you about her, and she won't mind if I use her name, because I tell her, the love I have for you is because you're really caring. She does care about a lot of things. She's sensitive, and I think that's important. And I think love is the answer to it all. And there are many kinds of love. Love for your friends. Love casually instead of hating. You know, you say, oh, you poor thing, you know, I love you for whatever you got, and I don't want it, but I think that's primary. You have to love. You have to care, and you have to love. And you have to forgive. You have to forgive. And if you do all those things, then you don't, isn't it sad? Some persons or families they won't talk for years. They've wasted all that time. The one doesn't know how the other one feels even. Or you give the finger to some guy driving by and you're miserable. He doesn't even know that you are. And you spoiled that time. So I think it's important to avoid all that. Oh, and above all, be happy. And that'll solve all your problems. I don't see how it wouldn't, but you be happy. We once went to Disneyland in the it was probably in the early 80s, and this was a fella among all the other wonderful artists. They had their drawing pictures, and he drew this one of me, and I'm guessing that I was, well, in the 80s, in my late 50s probably, and that's how he saw me. And I don't know if I look like myself. I wished I looked like that right now, but I have to be careful how I smile too, because I lost a tooth here. I lost a couple of teeth. Yeah. Because, yeah, and this is true, you have to know all these things. My bridges are ancient, and 15 years ago they had reached their peak, right? Now I'm just here, and they're getting, so the mouth is saying, forget it, we're receding, out go the teeth. So if I lose any more shit, I won't be able to eat. But I thought I'd be dead before these things happened. It was a house on 34th Avenue in Oakland that my grandfather built for my grandmother and their 4 children. They moved in just about a month before the earthquake in San Francisco, where they were living at the time. And the house is still standing. It's 100 and some odd years old. I think I mentioned in my other village that this is where the Vietnamese family live now, with Buddha on the porch, where my mom used to have her little Madonna.